views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the program host and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by TCN TV Network Incorporated. Due to the social nature of this broadcasting channel, videos may contain content copyrighted by another entity or person. The TCN TV Network claims no rights to the said content. TCN TV Network cannot be held accountable for the copyrighted content. TCN TV Network is a messenger and sharer of information and strives to verify but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyrights or completeness of the information on this program.
And then we expand on them with very. I'll finish off the change by buying gum. Pardon? What? And it took me a while to decipher what he was saying. I came up with we can get better at what we're weak at, and we can even get better at what we're strong at. What makes communication healthy or effective? And Welcome to this edition of What Matters. I'm your host, Erica Lita, and today I am here with
Dr. Andrew Blackwood, also known as Coach Drew, and
Dr. Vidoll Regisford here again.
Yay! So today our psychotherapist specialists are here to talk about talking.
yes,
Specifically men speaking. And the title of our program is Let Men Speak. So we have to start off with the first question, a very important question, and I will start with Dr. V because you're not here as often. What matters to you?
What matters to me?
What matters to you?
Well, when we think about letting men speak, I think there's a myth out there. And the myth is that men don't speak. They're not capable of speaking. They don't have the capacity to speak. But the truth of the matter is when you get men together, they speak. And they speak quite candidly about the things that affect them. They are prepared and willing to be very vulnerable. But we've got to create a safe environment for them to speak. And so from my perspective, what matters to me in this context is getting men to feel more and more comfortable with speaking. Thus, our symposium this weekend, Let Men Speak.
Okay, and Andrew, you're up. You get to answer this question several times throughout the year.
yes.
So you can change it from time to time if you wish. But what matters to you, Andrew?
What matters to me? Generally speaking, purpose matters to me, and part of my purpose as a facilitator of change and a facilitator of healing is helping other people learn how to do that for themselves, with themselves. And in this case, we're talking about men, specifically men in our community, men of color, black men. And I think we need a whole lot of healing, but I also believe that we have that within ourselves to give to each other.
Okay, so when I was doing some research and I was looking at the title, Let Men Speak, which we will tell you about the event that's happening on February 1st in a bit. But I was thinking to myself, let men speak. Who's not letting them speak? Who are you asking to let you speak? What is preventing you from speaking? So when you say let men speak, who are you speaking to? Is it other men? Is it women? Is it society? Who are you asking? Is this an asking of permission, or is it an expression of frustration? Let us speak. I really thought more and more about the name, and it sounds like someone's preventing you from speaking. Who is it?
That's one of the impressions in a possible interpretation. But it's more of a declaration.
Okay.
Almost like, let there be light.
Yes.
You're declaring something to happen. We're putting something in motion, something that doesn't happen often enough. But it's an empowering invitation for us to speak. And it's the exact opposite of asking for permission. I think for so long it's been worked and woven and beaten into our paradigm, our psyche, that we need permission. We need permission to talk. We need permission to go here. We need permission to do this. If we don't, at least that's how I was raised. Mm-hmm. If you don't get permission to talk, if you don't permission to do this, and if you do this and you do it wrong, you're going to get beaten, right? It's that kind of mentality that I grew up with, and I think that a lot of people share, that we're not free. We're not really free.
And if I can also add to that, I think when you look at our culture and how culture and society has changed, let's say the last 30, 40, 50 years, you see increasingly instances where men feel as though their voice is not heard, they're not valued, their opinions are not valued, and as such, close in. And so it is about what my colleague says, and that is, let men speak. It's okay to speak and to express yourself and to be heard and to be vulnerable. And I think that was something that was really illuminating for us when we hosted the first encounter, so to speak. And that was, men were remarkably vulnerable in a public forum. They spoke about their experiences in a deep and in a passionate way. Whether or not they do that or have that access to do that in other avenues in their lives is another matter entirely, but certainly in that evening and within this collective brotherhood, they were able to speak candidly and forthrightly and vulnerably. Quite remarkable.
Well, I would love to be a fly on the wall for that. It's interesting what you said, though, Andrew, about not feeling free. And, you know, obviously I'm going to speak from my perspective as a woman. And as a young girl, especially in our culture, I know that a lot of other young women felt the same way. We felt that the guys were completely free. They could go where they wanted to. I mean, my brother and I were 10 years apart, and I remember being 16, sitting on the balcony inside and watching my 6-year-old brother on his bike riding up and down the street because I had to be inside and he was still allowed outside. So I think that from a lot of women's perspective, men get to do and go where they want, but reflecting on that more and thinking about it more, maybe physically you guys are allowed to go where you want. You have longer curfews, you're allowed to kind of go out further, but you're more restricted in what you can say. So girls would get together and they would talk and they would share and so forth, and we may have to stay within a boundary, but we were free to express ourselves. Whereas boys, speaking about us when we were younger, they were free physically. They could go places, but I guess they were more restricted in what they could express and what they could share and the interest they could show. So it's very interesting from a different perspective. And then to hear you say that, you know, you had this event, there were how many men there at the first one?
Approximately what, 30 or so men?
No, there were over 40.
40? Yeah.
And you're saying that they were sharing in a public forum. And most of these were adults, right?
Yep.
And they were sharing. So that to me is very surprising. And as I said, I would love to be a fly on the wall for something like that. But obviously, you know, I'm sure that a
Maybe
woman.
time for that.
No, I believe that time is coming,
Yeah.
for sure. And that's part of the dynamic of freedom that I'm thinking about. Even when we step out to do a venture like this, a lot of the times, at least in my mind, and I imagine the minds of other people, it can sound like we're excluding people, not including people. You know, you're focusing on black men when, you know, the reality is a lot of the themes and topics we're talking about are relevant to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So the freedom to be with each other, right? There are so many barriers to just men being with other men, right? They're you know, people have fears about it. People have thoughts about it, beliefs about it. So sometimes there's a lack of freedom to do that. But we were in that environment. There were no guns. There was no violence. Most of these people didn't know each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, I met so many people that I've never met before. We've cultivated relationships, professional relationships, friendships, brotherhood, and that's the point. It's not that we are better than or trying to do things, you know, necessarily without, but it's more an attempt to do things together, to be with in a way that is the opposite of what we see in the gun violence that's happening in our city, often between men of color. Like,
yes.
you know, so something is happening or has happened, I would call it trauma, and a whole bunch of other things that's been unaddressed for generations. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the lack of men speaking with each other, the lack of brotherhood.
And I think what was remarkable is that this event happened on a Saturday night. Of all nights when men could be out doing a whole range of other things, they came willingly in inclement weather to have a conversation amongst themselves. I want to get back to what you said earlier on, Eric, and that was, when you're younger, you're inside and your sisters and whomever else and the guys were left to roam. We shouldn't assume that the conversations were not happening. It's the kind of conversations that might have been happening. I dare say when we as boys growing up, riding our bikes in the neighborhood, doing a whole lot of things probably that we shouldn't be doing, we're probably talking about a whole lot of things that weren't necessarily at a deeper level within us.
Right.
They're more superficial conversations, whether we are at sports or what we like to do, or just getting our male bravado out. As we enter into adults and adulthood, and as we enter into relationships, realize more and more and more that those skills around communication need to modify. They need to get to a place that's more deeper, more intimate, more introspective, and that is a challenge because we didn't learn them.
Right.
The kind of conversations we learned was, yeah, he's my boy and that's it, and we're going to go play ball, let's go over to Pizza Hut or whatever it may be. But we didn't get to a place of really talking and learning about each other and really speaking into each other's lives. What's brought us to this place is maturity, relationships, becoming professionals, and recognizing that the survival of our adult relationships hinges on our capacity, on our ability to communicate well and sound, and communicate at a deep personal level, not at the superficial level anymore. Would you agree?
100%. And when you said what brought us to this place reminds me of why the pivotal factors that brought this about. It was one suicide after another in our community that moved us to bring these therapeutic conversations out of the sacred walls of our clinical practice into public, into open spaces, that we can have therapeutic relationships. It doesn't have to be in one-on-one counseling. We can be with each other in a way that cultivates healing and communication, like you were talking about. It's very different than saying, okay, let's go do this, and we've done this together, so we've created a bond, which that's part of being community. But how do you put words to your experience? We were talking with a brother just yesterday about, his introduction to pornography. There wasn't much talk in there.
No.
Right? There weren't opinions shared, but there was an understanding that he gleaned from what was happening in the environment. Those are the kinds of things that we are left not talking about, right?
Yeah.
How that shapes one's internal world, their relationships. Their relationships with women, their relationships with themselves, their relationships with police, their relationships with everybody. Those are the things that we haven't been speaking about.
And, when you said our relationships with police, I think about a scene from a movie that really touched me. It was one of the first of many of that kind. It was Boys in the Hood. And, after these young men, and it would happen so frequently where they lived, where they didn't have these encounters with police, and they had this shared experience, but they never unpacked it. They never teased it apart. Whereas oftentimes women will do a little something, we'll talk about it for days in detail and pick it apart and what do you think they meant and so forth and so on, where men go out and they do so much together, but then they don't talk about it. And interestingly enough, it's also in the way everybody has a different style of communication. And then you can put on, the fact that they want to categorize men and women in different ways. And interestingly enough, my son the other day, he messaged me and he said, can you send me so-and-so's number? And I was like, I keep sending you the same number. Why don't you save it? Like you keep Mom, send me this person's number. And I was speaking to a male friend and he said that's his way of saying hello. And I went to instantly say, well, then why doesn't he just say, oh, because that's not what he's going to do. He's not just going to say, hey, Mom, what you up to? What you doing? I want to bother you. It's, well, send me the number you sent me yesterday again. But it's a way to connect. So I took that man's word for it, that maybe my son was actually saying something a little bit different, and I should give him the number and then maybe throw something else in there, some other kind of communication to open him up. Because he's reaching out for you. Why do you think he keeps asking for the same number over and over again? I said, because he's lazy. But that very well could be it. So sometimes I think we have to figure out other people's, we talk about love languages, but sometimes you have to figure out people's language, even when you both speak English. Because they're saying something to you, but if you're not hearing it, it's just stop asking me for the number instead of, so where are you going after? Are you leaving the house or whatever? So when we come back from this break, we spoke a little bit about why we are having, well, they are having, I can't go yet. I'm going to try sneaking eventually. They're having Let Men Speak. But when we come back, we're going to speak a bit about the impact on the family and the man himself. What changes him financially, socially, all of those things. And there is an economic tie between how social you are and how much money you make. We'll be right back after this break.
Yo, this is Conscience and you're watching my TCN TV network. Peace.
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity and our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
Welcome back to this edition of What Matters. We are here to let men speak, and two of the men speaking today are Dr. Vidoll and Coach Drew. They are here with me, and we are talking about how much men need each other. Doesn't that sound scary to some of you? So, I wanted to know, really, some people say, well, what's the big deal? You know, you guys are fine. Men rule the world. Why do men need to speak? Men are always talking. They're the ones that have the stage. They're the ones that are in control. And when I disagree, I think that a lot has been taken out. And something that you mentioned, and I did a bit of research on, they were talking about how now single-sex activities, institutions, clubs are being more and more shunned. And they're becoming almost taboo to have a boys' club or anything that's all one sex, because in this very inclusive society we want everyone to be included everywhere. But as a woman, as men, as Black people, we know that not every space is for everyone. And I'm sure that I'm going to come under great fire for saying that, but it's the truth. Not everything is for everyone. And as women, we create spaces that are for women. And I think that the backlash, that's really what it is that for a long time, there were many spaces that were just male. But I think that in trying to prevent that now and making sure that women are in every space a man is in, I think that there's some negative effects there. What say you?
You know, as you were talking, I was just thinking about my daughters. They're still very young. So I still bathe them. I help out, you know? But at some point, it will be inappropriate for me to bathe my daughters. Like, you know, you cross a line somewhere.
Yep.
Like, nobody's going to tell me when that line is, but somehow, some way, you know, because every child is different. And I think societally, if everybody is the same and everybody has equal access, we might miss out on some developmental pieces for ourselves. So that's, for me, when I think about my own personal experience, about my own identity and my own manhood, that whole piece of freedom, I've always been meant to be free, but I didn't always feel free. And part of that for me was the experience of being bullied as a kid. Like, a lot of men out there were molested or exposed to certain things. I was exposed to witnessing a traumatic scene in a movie, a rape scene, and then the bullying. Those kinds of things robbed me of my manhood at 6 and 7 because I didn't want to be like that. Like, I couldn't stand up for myself. The way that you start to turn in on I speak for myself. The way I turned in on myself, I questioned myself. Something's wrong with me. Those kinds of questions. Who was I supposed to talk to about that? Growing up, and I grew up in Jane and Finch, so there is that there was many understandings about life and what it means to be black growing up in Jane and Finch, what it means to not be strong. What does that say? If I had somebody to talk to who looked like me, who I could relate to, and be like, oh, okay, so I don't have to be like that in order to be
a man.
I don't have to be like that to be me, or this doesn't say something about me. I can still be authentic me. There's something healthy about a mirroring that happens in relationships and in families. And when people don't have that, they miss out on knowing themselves. So you see that as families get older. I do a lot of grief work with families. There's something wonderful when people can see similarities and differences in their families. You have a sense of belonging. You can be different and still belong. When that doesn't happen in your family, it's very unlikely to happen in community. So then we latch on to people who are exactly like us. And if they're not exactly like us, we don't fit. And everybody's trying to find a label that works for them, and nobody's ever going to fit rightly just in one group. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is it is a complex dynamic where seeing somebody who you can relate to, who can affirm you, who can relate to certain things, and the things that they can't relate to, they can still respect, that's invaluable. That's invaluable. So I think it makes a difference. I don't know very many men who have grown up without fathers in the home that haven't been reeling, dealing with pain and the ramifications of not having their dads in the home.
Yes.
It matters, right? It matters.
It matters very much.
Most absolutely. I think back to being a young man who grew up without a father and how important it was for me to learn from others about what it is to be a father. Now, did I get it right? Probably about 95%. But it would have been really helpful if there are others who knew I was father that took me under their arms and helped to coach me through those adult parenting years, that permitted me to have the kind of conversations that would be useful and valuable as a father and as a parent, so that my children benefited 100% of me being present and with the skills and the competencies and all of that. And so when you recognize that we all have some deficits, no matter who you are, men or women, we all have some deficits. The antidote is really, where do we find those compensating access points to others who can help us, support us? Yes, you can read books. Yes, you can go to seminars, podcasts, and the like. All helpful. But there's nothing that replaces the investment, let me say this, the intentional investment of another person in you with the unconditional positive regard. That no matter what, I'm here for you. You can make mistakes. You can, cause me problems. I'm still going to be with you because I'm in here for the long time, for the journey with you. Key and essential. It's what we say about students in school. If they find one adult that demonstrates that unconditional positive regard, and that's it, positive regard, that unconditionally, no matter what happens, I'm going to still see you in a positive light, that child will succeed. He or she will learn, grow, and prosper. If they're not able to, the chances are educational learning becomes challenging. And that's the access point.
And that's why, mentorship is so important. And somebody younger than you can mentor you.
Absolutely.
An adult can be mentored by another adult. Mentorship is so important, and I've brought this up in other shows that just doing exactly that. There might be a young boy that lives on your street or in your building, or you see at an event church that you go to regularly, and just that investment, that interest, showing them that you're interested in them as a person, and just by being who you are a role model to them, and it can be negative or positive. And interestingly, as we talk about how this affects the community, the lack of communication affects the community, there are a group of people that are very, very good at spotting children in need. They're very good at spotting the children that lack a father figure and lack attention, have parents working all the time, and they're the predators in our community. They see them very clearly, like little light bulbs on their head as these children run around. And those can be anything from horribly the pedophiles to the gang leaders. How do you think those gang leaders and the child traffickers get these kids in? Because they can spot the needy. So it's very obvious. These kids show signs and they model behavior. So that's how I believe it's so easy for them to fall into the wrong crowd. Because, as you said, in certain neighborhoods, the wrong type of male is the role model. He's seen as the strong one. He's seen as the tough one. He's seen as the resilient one, them not understanding sometimes the long-term effects. And I think also, too, what is frightening, I know for myself, is speaking to some young men and them telling me at a very young age they had no expectation of living past a certain point. So they made no plans. And they had no vision because they were just kind of doing a day-to-day thing with the expectation of being killed soon, and not death wishes, but just kind of, calculating what's going on around them and saying, well, chances are I won't be here. So you don't plan to be 30, and actually.
So if I can add, if you compound that with what's happening in Toronto, TDSB stats, roughly slightly higher than 30% of boys do not graduate. Black boys do not graduate high school. So imagine out of 100 boys, 65 of them will graduate. About 30 to 35% of them won't graduate. So once you disengage from school, not connected, you don't have significant adults in your life, what is your potential? Well, you're left to those negative elements in community, where you find family, where you find a place of belonging, and you reinterpret family to mean fam.
Yeah, yes.
Which means that we don't have to be blood, but we are connected. We're bounded together by this common experience of alienation, of isolation. And as such, we follow the lead. Wherever you go, I go. And I'm going to die with you. And I'm going to work with you. I'm going to be there with you. If we want to change that, we have to do what my friend here did the other day. He and I were out for breakfast. He's probably not going to share this today. But we're out for breakfast, and we're crossing the road. And there was an elderly gentleman, black gentleman, with a cane, with slushy. And he looked at us, and we gave him the brother's nod. We acknowledged him. And then he began to talk to us about the difficulty and the weather. And so my esteemed brother here reached out and said, would you like us to cross the road with you? And we both did. I took care of oncoming traffic. He guided him. And while we were walking, we had a conversation. We had a conversation about what it is to be black men in Canada. We had a conversation about the Canadian weather. We took a moment to go deeper than just simply the nod. And that's what we're going to be challenging men this weekend about. How do we go beyond the acknowledgement that is superficial to having a deeper connection with each other that really builds and strengthens community? That for me is essential. And that for me is the sustainable element of the work that we're attempting to do.
That's amazing. And I know we have to go to break, Dave, but I'm picturing the three of you crossing the street, and you don't know what young black man was sitting in a car and watched you guys go by, or was passing by you and heard a bit of that conversation and that seed that planted. And that's what makes me excited. These things that we do, these actions we take every day, you have no idea how far-reaching they can be. So when we come back from the break, we are going to touch on
Community.
community. Yes, we are going to touch on community. So Dave, we're going to go to break now. Welcome back to this edition of What Matters. I'm your host, Erica Lita, with my co-host, Dr. Drew, and our special guest. See, I got him back here this year, Dr. B. So today we are letting men speak. We are talking about the upcoming event as well that is happening on February 1st. It is the second installment of many more to come. And so we will, Dave, could you pull that up so they know where to go and when it is? There we go. Let Men Speak. The impact of positive male communities. And that's going to be happening on February 1st. It's from 7 to 8:30. Do you guys really get out of there at 8:30?
No.
No, it never happens?
That's the
Yes.
formal kind of bookend idea. But we do hang around to talk and look at resources and books and even wonderful paraphernalia
Yes.
and items, right?
We will talk about embellishes dreams.
Men do talk.
Men do talk.
We do talk.
I do believe that they do, and I'm happy to say that I'm from a community that my immediate family, they have a lot of strong relationships. My mom's one of 11 children, so my aunts and uncles are friends to one another. Great relationships. Watch my brother grow up with the same people from 5 to 35. And having strong relationships. And actually, I'll take this moment to highlight at least one of my sons. Dave, are you able to play one of those videos? Let's start with the youngest first. So this is my son, Darius, and I asked them, I posed the question, what do you do if a male comes to you with his problems? So we'll hear what Darius has to say. He's 10.
Hi, Darius.
Hi, Mom.
So I have a question for you, okay?
Okay.
Answer honestly, please. How would you respond if one of your friends, who's a boy, comes to you with one of his problems?
Okay. I would be fine. I would be open to his problems and I would try to help him if I can.
Has that ever happened to you?
Yes.
Yes? And did you feel like you were equipped? Do you feel like you were able to listen to him and you were able to help him?
I was able to help him 100%. Sometimes I can't. It's personal things, but most of the time, if I can, I will help.
You will help. So do you think it's a good thing for boys or men to talk to other boys or men about their problems?
Definitely. It's very important. I'm not saying you can't go talk to your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your sister or your wife, but honestly, you could talk to another male more often than you would talk to a female because males, or females and females, tend to get together a little bit better. It depends too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that is my son Darius expressing his views on if men should speak. And he has given us, as you can see, an emphatic yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Out of the mouth of babes.
Exactly, out of the mouth of babes. And so community. Before we do that, I thought this was fascinating. Dave, could you pull up that stat, please? Income and isolation. So the percentage of individuals based on annual family income who report feelings of loneliness or isolation from those around them all or most of the time. So as you can see, the more money people make is the less isolated they feel. Now, some people may argue that, well, you have more money, you have more access to things. But as we also know, people that make more money tend to work, longer hours. There is, in one of your summaries that I plagiarized off of Instagram, there was a part where you talk about the economic, the social, the spiritual. You named a lot of different categories where it affects men. And I was actually surprised when I found this, that it seems that more, and there are all kinds of reasons why the more social someone is the more money they would make. The more personable you are, it's obviously the more people you speak to. But there are reasons. Oh, and here's another one. They just talk about the benefits of friendship. And this is whatever sex you are. It actually has physical benefits to feel connected to the people around you, to have friendships. It changes how people heal. I think that is one of the reasons our elderly are festering more and more. They're not bouncing back because they don't have those grandkids to come by. We're so busy. A lot of people that are in their 40s and 50s, we now have this thing they call the sandwich generation. So you're taking care of children and you're taking care of parents. And I think that there's a lot of duty being done without the connection. Like you could have just had the man cross the street, but by saying something about the weather and saying something about the slush, and that starts to form the connection. So community. Men not forming. So you said that there are men meet in small groups and they talk to each other. But then as the groups get larger, they don't speak as much? Is that what it is? Or is it just in everyday exchanges? Where is it lacking?
I wouldn't want to make a rule about what it is and what it's like. I think all of these elements that we'll discuss are present on some degree in different relationships. But I think what is true about communication is some people say that, eyes are the window to the soul. I think that speech gives us access to not only our hearts, but our heads. We can tell how healthy somebody is by what comes out of their mouth.
Yes.
And if we don't practice speaking, a lot of things happen. The idea that a man would not go to the doctor and die of something like prostate cancer because he didn't talk about it, right? It's symbolic of what's happening in our families and in our communities. We don't know how to talk. And I think when we think about whether we're talking about spiritual, financial, social, we have these paradigms, we have these beliefs, we have these mindsets. They don't change unless you change. And one of the ways that people change is by discovering really who they are and what they think, and how they think. Most of us don't know how we think.
Most of us don't. And you said something that's really disturbed me, especially within our community. It's the keeping of disease quiet within families. I've had to tell my own family members, no, you do have to tell your brother what happened because he's your brother and there's a chance this could affect them. But like you said, just people getting sick, being not living their healthiest life just because they didn't want to talk about things that should be shared amongst family members. It's actually terrifying.
I was talking to a young man the other day, and he was just talking about how free he is now as a result of speaking, as a result of talking, as a result of understanding why he felt the way he did, why he thought the way that he did. It opened him up to a new way of being. He was able to let go of something.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to know himself on a deeper level, that doesn't happen unless we're speaking. It just doesn't happen.
And I think it's also about what are we speaking about. That's key. If we're speaking about hockey, basketball, and all those things, there's a time and place for that.
Mm-hmm.
But are we prepared to talk about those things that are deeply personal and important to us, that allow us to grow, prosper, and thrive? That's where we want encouragement to get to. Yes, speak. Yes, speak about those things that are entertaining, that are fun, but also be prepared to speak about your health. Be informed about your health. Talk about the relationships in your life and the challenges that you're having. And while doing that, seeking support and seeking the assistance of your fellow brothers along that journey. One of the men in our last conversation said that he went through a really messy breakup of a relationship that took more than a year. And the one thing that kept him going was a weekly text from a friend. That was it. Weekly text from a friend.
Wow,
that
not even a call.
That kept him going and kept him motivated. So we underestimate the importance of conveying caring and support and affection. So when we think about community, what are we talking about? We're talking about a group of people coming together that have a common interest through a common bond. And as a result of that, grows. And it grows to their level of activities that they're engaged with, as well as the kind of conversations they have. We all have communities that we operate within. And no, so said, so done. Some of those communities we find ourselves speaking more candidly, more open. I'm certain that you do with your girlfriends. You have one with your fellow friends. I do with my guys. We sit, we talk, and we hold each other accountable for going beyond just the surface, which might be slightly challenging, but necessary and important.
It is challenging. And interestingly, as we talk about, talking in community, specifically today we're speaking about men speaking, but the reason that human beings have gotten so far is because of our ability to share information. So instead of the next generation having to depend on inherited abilities, you actually can teach your child from a young age, this is how you do this. And so instead of them starting off at zero and having to build up that knowledge themselves, they can actually go dive off of your knowledge and get even further. So when we think about fatherhood, marriage, relationships, careers, if men are speaking to each other about these things that matter, not just stats and what happened at the game, but talking about their experience in fatherhood, and that could help that next person maybe skip some mistakes. Relationship wise, when an older man can say to a younger man, looking back on certain relationships, I can tell you why that didn't work. This is where I was. Especially if you kind of see that person in yourself. You sometimes see certain qualities in younger people that you had too. And when we share this stuff, we can actually help people just skip over a lot of stuff. I always say, instead of starting at 0% knowledge, you can start at like 53. And then the next person can start at 78. And then why have everyone start at zero? And I feel that the men, especially the men in the Black community, that's why a lot of our young guys are lost, because everyone's starting off at zero and trying to figure it out. And the ones that have gone before and have figured it out, some aren't speaking. Oftentimes with younger people, it seems like they don't want to listen, but it's amazing that they do. What they say and what they show you is not always what's happening. I've learned to talk to the back of my son's heads.
Right. And Eric, I think about what we are all witnessing right now. The last couple of days, most regrettably and most sadly, we have seen the loss of Kobe Bryant, superstar, truly a Renaissance man, a young man who can speak 5 languages, an athlete, a businessman, a father, and the conversations are happening. I really question whether or not the conversations are happening with men who might have had an interest in athletics or played the sport. I really question whether or not they're happening at a deeper level, which is, how are you feeling? How are you coping? How is this affecting you? How can I be there with you? See, that's the quality of conversation that we really want to inject amongst men, is to go a bit deeper than the superficial. Yeah, it's a loss, it's tragic, I'm shocked, I'm angry, I'm upset. Okay, then let's talk about why. What are you feeling about that?
Yes. Why did Kobe, what made Kobe mean so much to you?
Absolutely.
Those are the conversations, well, he inspired me to do this or seeing that. And you're right. I hope that things like this can lead men into deeper conversation. And one of the things that I'm very encouraged by is I'm seeing more and more men state very clearly, I want male friends. I want other men to talk to. And a lot of them speak about the struggle, that they're having a hard time finding the connection. And that's why I'm so glad that there's an event like this, and I plant the seed here, and hopefully it can be virtual at some point, where you can have men from other places be able to take part and perhaps join in on the conference, because it is needed. It is definitely needed. Dave, are we back to zero? Or did you not start it?
Back to zero for
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so when we come back, when we come back from the break, we are going to wrap it up with
talking about where we go from here, what we can do.
what we can do. So we always need solutions. We can't just talk about problems and not have the solutions. So what can you do? And actually, here's a good question. Is there any place for women in this conversation? We'll be back after this break.
There's always a time and place.
Well,
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity in our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
We are back from a wonderfully short break, talking about the upcoming event, Let Men Speak. And similar to Let There Be Light, there is a declaration of what's going to happen. We're going to be speaking. And to lovely Erica's question, is there a role for women? Obviously, and always there will be a role, many roles for women. We're very much in a very infant stage in this movement, and we're not just going to be sharing information at this event. We're going to be cultivating an experience that we want to really nurture and build some relationships. So
it is an encounter.
Yeah, definitely. So to that question, and then we'll come back to more details about the event. One of the things that I definitely want women to, we talk about it a lot, the role that women and mothers, sisters, aunts, grandmas play in the lives of young men is invaluable. So keep doing the wonderful jobs that you're doing. Keep affirming the young men as well as the more mature men in your lives. But as it pertains to Let Men Speak, we have an email address. hello@letmenspeak.com. Please send us your questions. Send us your comments, your hopes, your dreams, things that you think. That stuff is relevant to us. We do want that. We definitely want that. Invite your men to come out. Invite the men that you know. Let them know there's a resource. Those kinds of things will be really, really helpful. Push the information out.
okay, women. So that's what we're doing for this movement right now, is we got to share it. We have to let the men in our lives know that this is happening. A lot of them seem to only speak to us. Could you pull up that title of the Harper's one? Men are the one with the guy on the island. Did you see it? Men are not the lonely one. Basically, they're saying that there was an article that came out early in 2019, and it went viral. And basically, they're saying that because men don't have a lot of male friends, the burden has fallen on women. And so women are actually finding themselves in this as this person. Yes, so men have no friends and women bear the burden. So if the man in your life has no male friends, he's going to talk to you about, well, everything he's willing to talk about. And that can be very heavy for some people because you can't carry all the different parts of someone else. And I think that as women, as we have access to these men, we need to share. So hello at letmenspeak.com. Give them the email address. Let them know there's someone they can talk to. Tell them about the event. And that's what we can do right now. And raise your sons. Raise your sons to be able to speak. Be careful of the phrases that come out of your mouth. Man up. Be a man. When you're saying that, please think about your thinking. What does that mean to you? What are you exactly saying? I know I used to say to my children a lot, use your words. That was a big thing. Don't stamp, don't scream, don't moan. Use your words. And so I've always encouraged my kids to actually use their words. And actually, before we continue, will you play Kai's video? Because I'm sure he won't appreciate being left out. You're going to play it now? Okay, thank you.
Hi, Kai.
Hi,
Okay, I have a question for you.
I'm listening.
How would you respond, and be honest, how would you respond if another guy came to you about his problems?
It depends. Am I close with the person or no?
Yeah, it's one of your friends.
Well, then we listen to the problem and we figure it out.
Okay, so has this ever happened to you?
Yes.
Did you feel equipped?
What do you mean equipped?
Like-
Explain equipped.
When they came to you and asked you the question, did you feel like you had the ability to listen to them and maybe help them?
Yes, it's a friend. That's what you're supposed to do.
Okay, so in your opinion, it is a good thing when guy friends come to each other about their problems.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so that was my 17-year-old telling me his opinion on if it's a good idea for men to speak to men about their problems. And in listening to their unprompted responses, I feel as though I've done something
Many
right.
things. Many things right. Many things right. You know, one of the things that I think is really important is, yes, there's a reality that in small pockets, most of us are thankfully having some sort of connection. But what we're wanting to build is a solidarity in our community. There's something that happens when somebody who you don't know conveys a sense of your worth and your affirmation. If that's the automatic, what does that do for someone?
It elates them.
The messages that we've heard in our society, whether they're through terms like minority or where they talk about the incarceration rates, it conveys this idea that the most of us, most of the people who look like us, regardless of shade or tone, we're prone to aggression. We're prone to be unintelligent. We're prone to be unfaithful. You know, you automatically have a disassociation within yourself. It creates a sense of hopelessness and despondence, and that contributes to the amount of mental health concerns that we have. That contributes to people giving up and saying, you know what, I can't be Kobe. Like, I'll never be, right? Because it seems so far. The images of people who are having an impact in the world are so far removed from that little boy in high school that it's hard to make that leap, especially when your brain hasn't developed. You're not able to do the 5-year, 10-year plan. Like,
No.
your brain isn't developed that way. But if you see someone who is close enough to you, more people that look like this gentleman, you have access to in the community, like, you walk down the street any given day and you're going to see somebody and be like, that person is like me. Intelligent, faithful, wise, supportive, positive, respected. That does something to the ethos. That does something to the air that you breathe. That does something to the way that you think about yourself. And I think that matters. That's what we're really wanting to do. We're not just speaking to have conversations. We're speaking to cultivate a sense of community.
Yeah, to build
well-being.
community. And I love that idea. Like, when people belong, for example, to fraternities, I only actually found out we had fraternities here in Canada as an adult. So I missed the whole thing in college. But I see that connection when they see their letters, on each other's sweaters. And you're right about acknowledgement, because I know when I go to the Caribbean, and the one time I was in Africa, the fact that everyone who looked like me, when they passed me, acknowledged me, I was floating. I felt so important and so special. And it's a wonderful feeling when everyone who looks like you takes that second. Good morning. Hello. You really feel special and important. And it means a lot. It really does change so much.
Because your essence, your humanity was validated in that moment.
Yes.
Someone took the time out of the day to say, I'm going to acknowledge you. And as such, you responded, you reciprocated. And it became part of your nature, part of your natural way of expressing yourself. If we do that more, think about the impact that we can have on communities. Think about the impact that we can have with our elders when we acknowledge them, when we honor them through your deed or through the simple things. Think about those who are fatherless and motherless, how we impact them when we take the time to acknowledge them, acknowledge their worth and their value. And that might be with a smile, it might be with a hello, it might simply be with a word of encouragement. And guess what? It's free. It doesn't take much.
It really
doesn't take much. It just takes the preparedness to be present.
I was renewing my license and my health card, passport, and all that stuff today. And, I went beyond saying hello and, what's up, the brother's nod. And it was foreign. It was like these two gentlemen in particular, like they were shocked. I said, how you doing?
Yeah.
I was like, really, how you doing? And they were like,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm doing all right, thank you. It switched from shock to being like appreciation.
Yes,
right?
yes.
I can't tell, and I've been guilty of it for years.
Yes.
Like, going by people and so concerned and consumed by what I've got to do, what I don't have, what I need to do. Again, it's a paradigm of lack that I'm so glad to be growing out of, because when that's part of our culture, like we don't have enough, we can't afford, we don't have the time, then you really don't believe you have the time.
Yes.
You don't really believe you can have the impact unless you're a Kobe Bryant.
Right.
Right?
Precisely.
Whereas we all have the same amount of worth and value and wonder to contribute. You don't have to be rich. I want you to be rich, right? You don't have to be rich in order to be valuable. Babies are born into this world priceless. And we love them. They haven't done anything.
Nothing.
But somewhere along the line, it shifts for us, and we think because I don't have this, because I didn't do this, then I must be less than. That's not true. So that's what we're wanting to go back to cultivate that sense of just because you are here, you matter.
Yeah. And I think what I want to add to that too, and somewhat humorous, is the capital, the human capital that comes with that. That when we go to that extent, that we're able to really engage each other and benefit from that. I was during the Christmas season, I was at the Distillery District, and there was an art exhibit, and it was expensive to get in. And there was a brother outside working security. So I gave him a nod. And I said, how are you doing? He says, good. How's this Christmas been for you? Good. I'm a bit cold. Good. I said, what's going on in there? Does he want to go in? I said, sure, I'll go in. And I went in, and that was free. But my point is that there's some benefits. But the truth of the matter is that when we are engaged in community, we then begin to look out for each other and each other's family members, our children. We begin to extend ourselves. Yes, I can find a placement for your son at my place.
That's right.
And I can provide him that access that might get him grounded in his career. Or I know of someone who's got a part-time job that they can probably hire her. For sure. Let me make the connection. It builds capital, so it's building community, but we also build this thing called human capital. It's in the ether, but it's present if we access it. So we no longer talk about having to have money to be wealthy, but having relationships
to be
and
wealthy.
networks that bring wealth.
It's not what you know, it's who you know. So as we wrap this up, Andrew is going to take us out and let us know where, when, how, all of that. But just remember, let's start small. I'm not trying to shell shock you guys. Acknowledge the people around you. And I would have to say, especially young boys, I may look like a cougar doing it, but whenever I see a group of young black men, I do nod, I smile, I say hello. I've had a lot of looks of shock, like, why is she speaking to us? But you know what? Overwhelmingly, the response is so positive. And I think that seeing them in groups brings me joy. I know that sadly, recently, a lot of people, when they see a group of young black men, they get all kinds of weird ideas. I love it. It means they're together, they're hanging out, and I love to see that because I think they're literally our strength in numbers. So let's start there. I challenge you to do a little bit more than the chin knot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say hello. Start
Yes,
there.
absolutely.
And I would love your feedback. Drop it in the comments. Let me know what happens. Let me know if your day improved or if you ever got feedback that someone else did. So, Andrew, before Dave just cuts us off, tell us.
Saturday, February 1st, 7 p.m. It's at the Sandman
Hotel.
Hotel.
On Airport Road.
Airport Road. Thank you so very much. Hello at letmenspeak.com, www.letmenspeak.com, and that will have our quarterly events. But we've got some other events coming up as well. It's going to be a continuation of a lot of work that other groups are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Our focus is largely on addressing mental health as well as building community and doing it that way. I think when we get to the point where we are well as a community, when we realize and we can collectively say that we are significant, we have so much to offer. There is enough here. I don't have to protect my territory from you, right? There will be no need for me to shoot you.
Right.
When I value you,
yeah.
and I'm not trying to make sure that I keep all this stuff to myself. When I realize I have the wealth to give, not just of money, but capital, worth, value, then I have something to share. Then I have something to offer, and there will be a ripple effect in relationships, families, throughout our community and across the world. Someone I know love very much, and he's not black. He said to me, "You know what? I believe the world will be a different place when black men stand up and realize that they have so much to offer." Like, and it's the world is waiting for it.
Yeah.
And here we are
Here we
again.
are.
So let
That's
men
right.
speak. It's not about needing permission. It's not about needing approval. It's about believing that we have something to say. First of all, to each other, ourselves, and then to the rest of the world.
World. I love it. So thank you for joining us in this edition of What Matters. I'm going to get Dr. V back before the end of the year.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you for joining us. It was wonderful to have you. Next week, I will be back here with Nellie James. He was on before, and he is really an instrument of change. He's a wonderful young man that is shining and getting out there and just really, through tragedy in his own life, is spreading the word of positivity. So I look forward to seeing you all here next week, same time, same place, and I won't go over my commercial. Sorry, Grant. Okay, have a good night.
Good night.
Yo, this is Conscience, and you're watching my TCN TV network. Peace.